Okay. The Bills had a rough loss going from the chance to be first in the AFC East, and now they have to doubt their playoff hopes. Anthony, what'd you see in the game that happened?
I just saw a defense that couldn't stop the run. There was a lot of there were a lot of just missed opportunities within the game on offense. I was not pleased at all with Brian Dable's play calling in the red zone. I think he has to use Josh Allen um, a lot more in the red zone, particularly in the run game. I think he hands the ball off too much once he gets in the red zone, and then just obviously on the defense side of the ball, you have to once you realize that the team's only going to throw the ball 3 times, you have to be able to adapt and be able to stop the run. Because if you can't stop the run when everyone knows that they're running the football, that's a real problem. And in the grand scheme of things, they only gave up 14 points, which isn't terrible. The offense should be able to get the job done there, but they definitely on defense could have done a better job at bottling up the Patriots running backs.
Let's get more into Dable's play calling. Starting with the running game. It's been atrocious all year. I don't think anybody expected us to be towards the top of the league in rushing, but to not even be able to average 4 yards a carry from any of your running backs is disgraceful, especially in a game like this where you know you're gonna have to run the ball. Your team better be ready to start blocking, getting physical, and you have to win in the trenches. And you have Allen, who's what 6'5", I believe, and he's like 250 pounds, and he's probably one of the best running quarterbacks. He's one of the best running quarterbacks in the league, and he
Uh-huh.
only gets 6 carries, and one of them was just a big, I think, 25 yarder, maybe 30 yarder, and the rest he was basically he wasn't really used, and I think that's something you have to question with Dable, especially in the red zone. Why not do play action? Or there was a couple of times where if they had run play action rather than handing the ball off, Allen would have been free. I think there's a lot to question from Dable because this isn't his worst game either. There's been many questionable games for him. What do you think?
Yeah, completely agree. I think when you look at this offense, the best runner, sadly, the best runner on our team is Josh Allen, and you have to take advantage of that, especially in the red zone with his size. And we're just not seeing that right now from Brian Dable. And then the reason he's the best runner on the team is because we don't have a running back that is competent and enough to be, legitimate RB1. Like those problems with every running back. Like Matt Breida has problems holding onto the ball. He fumbles way too much. Singletary, he's not really explosive. You never feel like he's going to break a run, and sometimes he just gets bottled up in the backfield. And then Moss, he's like I was talking to you about earlier. His vision is just terrible. Like he literally just takes the ball and runs right into the back of the offensive lineman, and just thinks he's going to truck people when you're in the NFL and you're pretty undersized, and that's not going to happen. And so, unless his vision improves, he's going to keep being terrible. And so I think that proposes a question as to what the Bills do with the running game moving forward. And I think we need to strongly consider drafting a running back within the first couple of rounds in the NFL draft, or signing a big name free agent running back in the offseason. Because when you're playing in a city like Buffalo, when you know the weather's going to be bad, when it matters most towards the end of the season, and in the playoffs, just in general, you need to have a running game. Like you can't survive these conditions without having a running game that you can rely on, and that's consistent. And so I really think we need to address that in the offseason, because I don't think this team's going very far without a reliant run game.
I think something to consider is I don't know if they're gonna go after somebody in the draft, especially because Singletary and Moss were third round picks, and those were huge misses. Because usually running backs, when you draft them, even in the fifth round or undrafted rookies, are pretty successful once you just plug them into your system. But these guys, I don't know what the Bills saw in them because there wasn't really anything that screamed running back number one. I don't see anything in Singletary that jumps off the page, or Moss. Like physicality, sure, but if he's gonna average 2 yards a carry, what's the use of him? And then with Breida, yeah, he drops the ball a lot, and he was nice for a little bit. He provided a spark to the offense, but if he's turning the ball over about once a game, why is he in the lineup? So they have to consider other options outside of what they have right now because it's clearly not working. A name to bring up would be Antonio Williams. I think at least he has some potential with this team, and he's on the practice squad, I believe, right now. And he had a big game against Miami last year, Week 17, which he flashed like I think he flashed some burst, some physicality, and I think that's something the Bills need because he can break a run. I don't think any of these guys can break a run besides Breida, but Breida, you have to run him to the outside every time. And people can just pick what they want to do versus our running backs, like Zach Moss. Just he's going to run up the gut. He's not going to do anything. Breida, he's going to run outside. Singletary, he's not going to beat you for a big run. There's just too much predictability with these running backs. And I think drafting might be a mistake because they've gone down that road twice now, and then signing a free agent might be what you need to do. What do you think?
Here's my thing. I think drafting a running back in the third round is kind of like the elite guys are gone. The guys that you know are going to be good, they're gone. And when you really get to the third round or later, it's hit or miss with these running backs. Like you see this year, the 49ers drafted Trey Sermon in the third round, and then they drafted Elijah Mitchell in the sixth round, and he's the one that's getting all the carries, and he's turned out to be really good. And I think really it has something to do with your scouting and your general manager, but it's just luck at the draw at that point when you're taking a running back past the second round.
Well,
And then maybe that has something to do with Brandon Beane's, possibly poor scouting of running backs. But I think we need to just draft a running back in the first or second round to take away that risk and just draft someone that you know is going to be a stud and isn't going to be, a problem that you're worried about being a bust.
Well, remember who they wanted to draft in the first round. All the hype was around Travis Etienne. Of course, he's not playing this year, but everyone wanted him, and I'm pretty sure there was rumors from the Bills that surrounded them wanting him, and then he got taken by Jacksonville. They settled for Rousseau, who, yes, he was needed, but then you took Boogie Basham in the second round. Like, you couldn't have taken a running back with either of those picks. It's very questionable, They Boogie Basham sometimes isn't even playing. So what's the use of that second round pick? This is your championship window. You're not building for the future. You're trying to win right now, and a running back that could possibly be the catalyst for this offense, you don't have.
Yeah, I completely agree. If you look back at that 2020, 2021 draft, that was just a very questionable draft all around. I remember not liking the draft at all after it happened, and you think about what we're trying to do right now, and our strengths or our needs at the time were centered around our running game, and particularly our interior offensive line. At the time, we had Darrell Williams, who played very well at tackle last year, and Deion Dawkins at tackle. And so when you have a guy like Creed Humphrey, who's available in the third round, and you don't take him for Spencer Brown, who's a tackle, a position you already have, that just doesn't make sense because you need interiors more of a need, and that'll help out the running game a lot. And now you look at Creed Humphrey, he's one of the best guards in the league already. And then the fact that you draft defensive end back to back when you already have AJ Epinesa, that doesn't make sense either because one of those guys is going to be the odd man out and not getting that much playing time going forward. So that doesn't make sense. And then I know he hasn't been, bad so far, but coming out of the draft, I didn't even like Rousseau. I thought he was stiff as a board and he wasn't going to be able to bend and get sacks. And I guess to this point, that's somewhat proven true because he hasn't been able to get many sacks, but he still has been pretty good, and he's been better than I expected. But when I look at the draft as a whole, it's very questionable, and I think that was a pretty bad draft that we had in 2021.
Isn't it crazy, though, that with the offensive line you've invested so much in, that Allen is still running for his life? Cody Ford, second round pick. Mitch Morris, how much? I think he's the highest paid center, if I'm not mistaken.
Close, yeah.
Dawkins, you paid him for 4 years, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Spencer Brown, a third round pick, he looks like a stud so far. He's the only one who looks like he cares on the offensive line. He gets beat, but he's a rookie. He shouldn't be vital to your offensive line. Feliciano, they overpaid for 3 years. There's so much to desire with that offensive line, and it feels like nobody besides Brown for sure, and maybe Dawkins should be kept after this year. What's your opinion on that?
Well, that's the thing. This year, you can't screw it up, offensive line wise in the offseason, because if you didn't know last year that we needed interior offensive line, this year you really know, or you should know, that we need interior offensive line help, because Cody Ford is like a human turnstile at guard, and then Mitch Morse's contract is up after this season, and so you're not going to have Cody Ford, or I mean Mitch Morse. You're not going to want to have Cody Ford playing. You're not going to want to have Ike Bugger. And John Feliciano, I think, is just bad. I do not think he's good at all. I would prefer us to just release him. What I would do is I would just release Feliciano, because I think he's a waste of money. I would let Morse walk because he's getting up there in age and he hasn't really been that good. And I would just, I would also cut Cody Ford, and I would just draft interior offensive line high and invest a lot of money into interior offensive line and free agency. Just get guards, get a competent center, someone that you feel confident running behind, because that's where it all starts. It starts in the trenches. I get that running backs that we have right now aren't really seeing the holes well, but if there aren't holes to begin with, you're not going to go anywhere with your run game, no matter who's back there. So that's where it starts, and I think just interior offensive line and a running back has to be the number one priority going into the offseason.
Well, yesterday, if you saw what the Patriots were doing, they always had somebody keeping Allen inside the pocket so the interior pressure could get to him. And that's a huge issue. Like yesterday, guys were just being, like Mitch Morse was just being backed up by Christian Barmore, and there was nothing they could do. Allen was just like forced to run for his life. Not as much as Jacksonville. That's a different story. That in that game he literally couldn't do anything. But there's a lot, like, I don't know what you can do unless you're going to invest a lot of money, because there's a lot of money that needs to be spent around this offense, and starting with the running back, and then also you're going to have to be replacing most likely Sanders and possibly Beasley, because it seems like Beasley's being phased out of the game plan, and doesn't want to be there or something. There's something going on there that public does not know.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. I mean, I think after interior offensive line and running back, I think the next priority should be slot receiver. If you look at where the Jets got Elijah Moore this year, top of the second round, that means a guy like that could potentially be available in a late first round this year, and he's been great, and he's a slot receiver. I think something's going on. I mean, this game was hard to judge because there wasn't going to be that much passing going on anyway, but I agree that this season Cole Beasley hasn't been as involved, and whether that's because of his age, because of his vaccine status, or something else within the building that we don't know, something's definitely going on with that, and I think it would be wise to save some money and move on from him, even though he has another year left on his deal. Sanders isn't going to be back because he's old and only signed a 1-year deal, so if you're cutting Beasley and not re-signing Sanders, I think Gabe Davis is a really good player that can be a wide receiver too on the outside, but that still leaves a void at slot receiver. So I think this offseason we also need to address that. I would prefer to just draft a guy maybe in like the third round, and get someone that can play slot receiver. But yeah, I do think that that's going to be a need this offseason.
And then you're also going to have to consider what's going to happen at the cornerback position, which now we're flipping onto the other side of the field.
Mm-hmm.
Well, right now you don't have Tre'Davious White, and when he comes back, there's a chance he's nowhere near what he was. He was an All-Pro this year. He looked like he was getting back to all. He was going to be an All-Pro again. Now you don't have him going into Tampa Bay Sunday. You're gonna see what Tre'Davious White means to this team. I mean, Dane Jackson, I love him, great prospect, but he's no Tre'Davious White. He's very aggressive and he makes big plays, sure, but he gives up a lot of big plays. That's why he didn't beat out Levi Wallace in preseason. And Levi Wallace, I've never been high on him. It seems like every time we play the Dolphins, or any team for that matter, he's always being targeted. And now you got Dane Jackson, so it feels like Brady's gonna have whatever he wants. He can do whatever he wants. The only person that I really think in this secondary right now, well, of cornerbacks, will be Taron Johnson. He's the only guy who knows what he's gonna be doing. He's a great slot corner, but the problem is, yesterday you shouldn't have been playing um, nickel D, in my opinion. I think you should have, with AJ Klein out, that was a huge loss, but you should have been at least trying putting 5 defensive linemen out, or maybe at least Dodson got some looks in the 4-3-4, but maybe beefing it up a little bit, taking Dane Jackson or Levi Wallace out and just leaving Taron Johnson in because he's a bit bigger than them. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, we were actually stacking the box a lot yesterday. We had there were a lot of sets where we had Dotson, Milano, and Edmonds all in. I thought Milano had a great game. Edmonds not so much. That's another story. But I do think we were stacking the box. That was just I think that was just a problem of the Patriots O line just overpowering our D line, and I think that just comes down to kind of the battle in the trenches and who wants it more there. But yeah, Taron Johnson didn't get that much playing time yesterday, but he is probably a top 5 slot corner in the league. He's a great player. He's going to be with us for a long time. But getting back to Levi Wallace, part of the reason why he is targeted so much is because Tre'Davious White is on the other side of the field, and when you don't have a guy like Tre'Davious White in there anymore, that's really a problem for Levi Wallace, because now he's going to have to guard the guys that Tre'Davious was having to guard. And I agree with you. I'm not super high on Levi Wallace. He's very inconsistent. He'll have like really good games and then games like against the Dolphins where he has to cover Devontae Parker and he gets absolutely exposed. So I do think that Tre'Davious White being on the other side has something to do with him not looking great at times. But now it's going to be even harder because, like you said, when we go up against the Bucs this week, he's going to be guarding Mike Evans. And that leaves Dane Jackson and Godwin. I don't like either of those matchups, and so I think we're gonna get torched in the secondary next week. We're really gonna miss him, but I do think that moving forward we need to have a better solution at corner than at CB2 than Levi Wallace. I think we can draft someone. Maybe I know there's a lot of needs right now. It might be easier to get a free agent, but I think we have to get a corner opposite Tre'Davious White that is a little better than Levi Wallace and more consistent than Levi Wallace.
So, about the interior, on the defensive line, you had Starr. He got COVID, so he was on a snap count. I thought Harrison Phillips had a pretty good game, but for Ed Oliver, this just isn't the type of game he wants to be playing. He's not your traditional defensive tackle. He wants to be rushing. He's really fast, but he's not good in run stopping, and I think that was evident yesterday. Like, it almost seemed like having Starr and Harrison Phillips would have been better than having Ed Oliver. That's not a knock against Ed Oliver. I mean, he's a great player. He's having a great season, but this just wasn't the game that suited him. Even Boogie Basham was a better option on interior because of how big he is. And Ed Oliver is very undersized for a defensive tackle. And then going back to the cornerback position, if you didn't feel confident in Dane Jackson and Levi Wallace, as the Bills' general manager, why wouldn't you be getting like somebody like Stephon Gilmore? I know he probably doesn't want to be here, but you got to try everything to get another corner, because also if Dane Jackson or Levi Wallace go down, who's up next? Saran Neal, and he's a converted from a safety, and he's not very good in coverage, so that's something to look out for. What do you think about the cornerback position?
Yeah, just going off of that, I think Dane Jackson's going to have a lot of work cut out for him. I think that Brand Bean has to do a better job of. I thought this year, in this year's drafts, like I said, there was in that third round pick. There's also a guy named Fetu Melifonwu that the Lions ended up getting with a conditional third round pick that was available when we took Spencer Brown. And I like Spencer Brown as a prospect, don't get me wrong. It doesn't make sense with who you had at the time on the team. And I think if you took him there that would have gone a long way in filling that void long term at corner. But now I think you're kind of in a pickle here, and I think Brandon Beane's going to end up getting exposed now for the job or lack thereof that he's done of filling that void across from Tre'Davious White, because I think these guys are going to get torched by the Bucs, and I just don't think it's going to be a great look for the team. And then just to touch on Ed Oliver, I think Ed Oliver's been having a great season this year. This isn't his. The Terry game we saw last night is not his style of football. He's a traditional 3-tech guy. He likes to rush the passer. And then, we just got some news. Bills activate Tommy Doyle from reserve COVID and release Bobby Hart. Thank God. Anyway, but this game we saw actually Harrison Phillips led the team in snaps on the defensive line. And so Harrison Phillips, we really did everything we could player-wise to stop what the Patriots were doing. We put in Harrison Phillips, who's probably the biggest guy on our team. We put him and Starr in the most at defensive tackle. And then at edge, Boogie Basham got a ton of playing time. He's great at stopping the run. And so did Greg Rousseau. He's a run-stopping guy. Those are run-stopping guys. Those are our rookies right there. And that's why you didn't see as much of Jerry Hughes and Mario S. in this game. We really did everything that we could personnel-wise to stop what the Patriots were doing. We just, at the end of the day, I guess, weren't good enough.
Before we get into special teams, I wanted to say that Leslie Frazier has done a great job this year with this defense. I mean, making the most out of basically having a non-existent pass rush. They're pretty solid at stopping the run, but I don't think anybody saw them being great at pass rushing, and they haven't been. But he's done a great job with this defense, and it wouldn't surprise me if we see him leave. What do you think? Do you think he'll be here after this year?
I don't think so. I think he's a great defense coordinator. He's done a good job over the last 3-4 years now. Mm-hmm. There was a period a couple of years ago where Sean McDermott took over play calling on the defense because he wasn't happy with what Frazier was doing, but that's long gone, and he's been doing a good job. This obviously wasn't a great look last night, not being able to stop the run even when everyone knows it's coming. But I do think he's a good coach, and that overall he's done a good job with this team. And I think he's going to get a look. I mean, he interviewed for that Texans job. I don't think he would have wanted that anyway, but he's gonna get some opportunities this offseason. And then if you flip it over to the offensive side, I know there was a ton of hype around Brian Dable last offseason. He didn't get a job. And there was a ton of hype with him coming into the season. He's going to be great again, blah, blah, blah. I don't think he's been good this year at all. Last night was so bad for him. He just didn't utilize Josh Allen. His creativity wasn't there. Where are the jet sweeps that we're used to? Where are the deep balls? I just don't. The creativity on offense as a whole, it just wasn't there last night. I haven't been impressed with him, and I would not be surprised if Dable doesn't get any opportunities this year to get a head coaching job. And I wouldn't be surprised if we just flat out let him go, because he just has been very underwhelming this year.
That might be a little bit hard, though, given their Allen's relationship with Dable. But this gets into our special teams thing. There's a huge two inactives. The returners of McKenzie and Stevenson both were inactive. Obviously, Stevenson hasn't really been used on the offensive side of the ball yet, but he was. I think he provided a lot of speed in the return game in the Saints Thanksgiving game. But it was surprising you activated Zach Moss or Matt Breida, one of them, who only had 1 and 3 carries each respectively. But you couldn't have had McKenzie out there for at least some use in the run game with the jet sweeps, which he's been known for in Buffalo for the past 3 years he's been here since we signed him. It's a very confusing inactive, and I think it was a huge loss for the Bills, especially I'm sure Dable would have loved to have McKenzie out there, because Diggs, Sanders, Davis, they're not exactly fast, not as fast as McKenzie, and they're used very well in the offense, in my opinion.
Yeah, there are two things that come to mind when we're thinking about that decision that he made to have McKenzie and Stevenson inactive. I think the first one is that 2 weeks ago, Isaiah McKenzie had some problems holding onto the ball, and then we saw him inactive for the Saints game. And Stevenson muffed a punt in the Saints game. I know he recovered it, but he still muffed it. And so I think that has something to do with both of them being inactive. And then the other thing is, the whole season we've had one running back inactive. I don't think maybe in the beginning of the year we had all three of them active, but as of late it's been always that one running back's inactive. And I think this game McDermott knew that we were going to be running the ball a ton, and so he wanted to have all of his running backs at his disposal in case something happened to one of them, and he also wanted to have some diversity. So I think he's both sending a message to Stevenson and McKenzie that they have to be better, and he also trusts Micah Hyde, and he wanted to have all of his running backs at his disposal because of the weather and probably the fact that all of them have been inconsistent, and he wanted to just test who the hot hand was going to be and roll with him for this game. And it turned out that no one was hot, so it didn't work out very well. But I think those are the factors that went into that decision.
The comments, though, after the game, McDermott said he felt more comfortable with Hyde, especially in that weather, returning kicks. So if he's going to be returning the punts, why not the entire season save a roster spot for somebody else that you might need to use, such as maybe giving Boogie Basham more reps, because somebody is always inactive on the defensive line. Yesterday, I think it was F.A. Obata, which I would have loved to have in the lineup yesterday, especially with Starr's condition. Like, if you trust Hyde back there, let him be back there. And I don't understand the move there. If like by McDermott, you don't trust Stevenson and McKenzie, okay, leave Hyde back there. I trust Hyde a lot on those. And then getting into the punting and kicking for the Bills, Matt Hawk had a great game, I think, for him. No punts were blocked. That's what I'm happy about. It's kind of sad to say. I don't really trust Hawk. I don't think he was worth letting Bajorquez go. And then Tyler Bass, I thought, had a great game. Now, he did miss that one kick. Well, he only tried 2 kicks, I believe. Was it yesterday? 2 or 3?
I think 3. I think he was 2 for 3.
And then the one he pushed wide into the wind, he at least managed to get it close. I think he's got a great leg.
No, he was 1 for 2. 1 for 2.
1 for 2. Okay, he has a great leg. I think he's the perfect kicker for Buffalo. He was in the same class as Rodrigo Blankenship, I believe. And I think both ended up where they should have. Blankenship is now kicking in a dome for Indianapolis, which is where he fits. Bass is now in Buffalo with his big leg, and he fits well in Buffalo kicking into the conditions.
Yeah, he's a great kicker. The miss that he had was into the wind. You can't really, when there's gusts up to 50 miles an hour, he's kicking right into the wind and he barely misses. You can't really put too much blame on him for that. I blame more of the coaching there for just doing a terrible job in the red zone. But yeah, he's been good this year. He had the first kick he had was good. And Matt Hawk played great. He had a couple of really good punts that were huge in terms of the field position battle and being able to pin them back so they have to start their drives really far back. And so that was huge. And then just going back to the Isaiah McKenzie thing, I think you're right. I think it would make more sense if we just held on to one of either Isaiah McKenzie or Marquez Stevenson. I don't know if we should. I don't think we should get rid of both though, because I think me and McDermott probably want to have an explosive option at punt return. Micah Hyde is not going to be really returning punts very far. He wants to. I think McDermott just wants to have more of a threat at the return position. I think he's just more sending a message to those guys, and that's more of a short-term thing. And I think in the long term, he's going to want one of them returning. But I do think that we shouldn't hold on to both. We should at least have one of them on the practice squad. Because you're right, we always have one defensive lineman inactive, and that's where we tend to struggle. But that's also one of our deepest positions, and so it would be nice if we could have young guys like Boogie Basham and Epinesa active every game. And in this game, Obata being active probably would have given the guys some more some fresher legs, and so that probably would have been big for us. So yeah, I think if you just put Stevenson back in the practice squad, I don't see anyone claiming him. I don't think he's done anything to really wow anyone enough to make them want to claim him. So that's what I would do. And yeah, I think going forward, he'll end up putting McKenzie back on the active roster and having him active going forward.
Let's get into what happened post game. This was obviously a huge, an emotional loss for the Bills, especially
Yeah.
with the hype around this game, especially in Buffalo. You were at the game. I'm sure it was crazy out there for the tailgating, and it was a full crowd even in this weather. What can you tell us about the post game that was really telling about this Bills roster and team?
Yeah, like you said, it was an emotional game. There was a ton of hype leading up to it. It was one that we really needed to have if we wanted to win the division. And there was a lot writing on it. Just having the being able to wanting to dominate the Patriots and wanting to kind of make your mark on the AFC East. That's all on the line there. And we weren't able to do that. And when the Patriots come out on top like that, obviously the guys are going to be frustrated. And I think Poyer and Hyde just have had a little bit of an overboiling of frustration there. I don't think the question was out of line. I think they should be embarrassed for allowing 222 yards on the ground when the quarterback only throws 3 times and everyone in the stadium knows what they're doing and you still can't stop them. That is embarrassing. And I think they should be embarrassed for that. I think they just took it personally, and I think it was more of like a heat of the moment thing where they were really pissed off about how this game happened and they thought someone was taking a shot at them. And I really think it was just more of a heat of the moment thing. And I think if they look back and they were asked that same question today, after the game, a significant amount of time after the game ended, I think they would answer differently, and they would handle themselves more in more of a respectable way. I do think that it's a bad look for Hyde and Poyer, though. I think that's kind of immature of them to just kind of walk off like that and answer the way they did.
There has to be some frustration though from the defense with the offense.
Definitely.
This defense has consistently been one of the best defenses for the past couple of years. And then this year they're playing lights out. They're giving the offense about every chance you can get. Like in the losses, Pittsburgh, they only allowed 13 points. The punt block doesn't really count. Jacksonville only 9 points. The Titans game, yes, a lot of that blame has to fall on the Bills defense, but that was one of the only games where they fell apart. The Indianapolis game, they fell apart, but the offense had many chances to get back in that game. At least 2 drives. If the offense had connected, the game would have been a lot closer. So there's a lot to unpack. I think there's gonna be there's a lot of disconnect between the offense and defense. What are your opinions on that? And is McDermott losing the locker room?
I don't think he's losing the locker room because I think the players buy into his message and all the humble and hungry stuff and stuff like that. I really think they like him and they buy into that. And they've seen it work. Last year it worked. So I do think they trust McDermott still and they like their coach. But when you see Hyde and Poyer talk about, oh yeah, we only allowed 14 points. Like, what do you want us to say? Like, they're kind of throwing the blame on the offense there. And that, yeah, if I was Josh Allen, I'd probably take that a little personally considering the conditions. And yeah, maybe there is some tension there between the offense and defense. Obviously, when you have the expectations that this team had going into the season, being 13-3 last year and seemingly improving in the offseason, and you're 7-5. Yeah, everyone's going to be frustrated. So I don't think it's anything that's completely out of the ordinary in terms of how players are acting, but I do think there is some tension right now between the offense and defense. Less though than there is more tension though than there is between the players and McDermott. I don't think there's any problems going on between McDermott and the players.
Let's also call it for what it is. Bill Belichick is just on another level of coaching than McDermott. It's not even close. Belichick outsmarted him yesterday. He knew what he had to do. He said, fine, we're not going to beat you passing the ball. Well, we don't need to. And he shoved it down our throats. throwing the ball 3 times, that's just emotionally gutting for a team that's been on a roller coaster since, honestly, Kansas City's game in the playoff where we got smoked. It's just been an emotional roller coaster. And also McDaniels is on another level than Dable. That's evident. So when you look back at this coaching, we're always going to get outcoached by the Patriots. And we're just going to have to beat them with our personnel. And I think in this setting, yes, we were going to be at a disadvantage running the ball. But hopefully next time we play New England, week 15, I believe, we're going to be able to throw the ball and show them what we've got.
Yeah, when you think about it, this game really lined up perfectly for New England. They're a run first team. They have a 3-headed monster in the backfield between Harris, Bolden, and Stevenson. And Mac Jones has only averaged like around 200 yards passing per game. So this game, like conditions wise, just lined up perfectly for their strength. And the fact is, the weakness of our defense is our run defense, and Bill Belichick knew that. And if you flip it over to the offensive side, we're a pass-first offense. We don't have a run game. Literally, it's non-existent besides Josh Allen just scrambling. And so, and how are we going to pass in 50-mile-an-hour gusts? Like, that's why Josh Allen's completion percentage was 50%. But the lack thereof of a run game is why he threw the ball 30 times to begin with. No one in their right mind in those conditions is going to throw the ball 30 times. And the reason he did that is because the run game is so incompetent. And so it really just didn't line up well for this team. You could probably predict before the game who was going to win, just based off of the strengths and the weaknesses of each team. But I do agree. I think next week, or not next week, but the next time we play the Patriots, it's going to be different. I think the Bills are going to be more respectable because if it's not 50-mile-an-hour gusts and sideways snow and whatnot, I think we're going to be able to show them, what we're made of and pass the ball like we normally do. And I think it's going to be a much tighter game, and we're going to look more respectable and probably, either have it be really close or we come out with the win, either or. But I do think straight up on paper that we're better than the Patriots. And I think if we play them in a dome, I think we win that 7, 8 out of 10 times. So, hopefully next time we play the Patriots in Foxborough, it'll be different. And we'll be able to show them, what we're made of. But I just think last night was just an unfortunate, perfect storm for New England.
It's possible we see this team now 2 times before the season's over for the Bills.
Yeah.
With the new playoff system, 7 teams getting in, that's going to benefit the Bills a whole lot this year. But we need to talk about the giant elephant in the room. All these losses that they had at the beginning of the year, the Steelers, the Colts, the Titans, they're coming back to bite us right now at the most critical time in the year. I think it's possible we don't make the playoffs, which would be probably the biggest letdown for this team that could have happened. To go from probably the favorite in the AFC to win the Super Bowl to now you might not make the playoffs is a tough pill to swallow. And there's a bunch of teams behind us that if we played them today, we probably wouldn't win. Like, obviously the Colts, I think they can just run it down our throat. Cleveland. Even though Cleveland doesn't have a quarterback, they could do just what the Patriots did, run it down our throat, play solid defense, and beat us. There's going to have to be some improvements in the offseason because this team just isn't cut out for the Super Bowl. But what do you think our playoff seeding is going to be a final record? What do you think?
I think this weekend, this weekend is going to be a loss against Tampa. The way our secondary is, we talked about it earlier, the way Dane Jackson and Leo Wallace are our top 2 corners. I don't see any way that we beat the Bucs with that coveted receiving core that they have. But then going forward, I do think we get the win versus Carolina. I think we beat the Jets. I think we beat the Falcons, and then we just have New England again. And it's either going to be 10-7 or 11-6. And I don't know why I'm confident, but I am confident for some reason that we're going to be New England the second time around when we can, assuming it's respectable weather conditions and we can really play our game. I I think we're going to beat New England in a tight one, and I would say that we're going to be 11-6 and probably have the 5 seed.
Is it possible we win the division still?
No,
You think it's out of the question?
It's gone. They have the tiebreaker right now in 2 games.
You know, the Patriots have dominated this division for 20 years, and I think Buffalo fans finally got a glimpse of what the future looks like when we just swept the division last year. Nobody was close to our level, and this was a great game to establish dominance over that division, because if you can win this game, you're almost a lock for the division, especially with our division record. But now you got to question, first of all, making the playoffs, and then you've got teams right on your tails. I mean, the Dolphins are closer in record to us than the Patriots. That's scary. The Dolphins, they were expected to be the team to compete with us for the division. This year that didn't happen, but they are putting themselves back in the playoff picture, and they've got a relatively easy schedule down the stretch, especially not having to play us. And then next year, you're going to have the Jets. I know people think they're dysfunctional, but they're improving. Zach Wilson may not be great, but there's a lot of pieces there. Elijah Vera Tucker. Who's the guy you mentioned? Elijah Moore.
Yeah.
And then you got Corey Davis. You got Michael Carter. They've got some pieces there. The Patriots, it looks like they're here to stay now, especially with Mac Jones. They can just... All they really need is a running game, and they'll be fine. And they're always going to have a good defense, no matter who they've got. And then the Dolphins, they're going to improve. I think they're going to stick with Tua. But now you got to think about where are the Bills right now? Because we were thought to be Super Bowl contenders. We might not make the playoffs. What do you think?
Yeah, the thing I would say about the Dolphins is they're hot right now, and they're 6-7. But there's no way they catch us because we beat them twice, and we have the tiebreaker. So I don't see them surpassing us. I'm feeling pretty comfortable about where the Dolphins are. And then the other thing I would say is going forward, like how are you talking about, the Patriots they're here to stay. But at the same time, if you look at who we have at quarterback, we're going to be here to stay for a long time. And it's not going to be another 20-year period where the Patriots just utterly dominate us. It's not going to be that way. We're going to be in it. As long as we have 17 at quarterback, we're going to have a chance to win the division. And we're going to be respectable, and we're going to have competitive games against New England. So we're going to be in it for years to come as well. I don't think it's all gloomy for Bills fans. And then, yeah, overall division outlook, Dolphins are kind of on the rise. Jets, don't really know, but they have some solid pieces, and Patriots are going to be right there. So I think, this could have the potential to be a competitive division going down the road, but I still think the Bills are in the best position to be successful and have the highest ceiling by a lot going forward because of who we have at quarterback and then just the playmakers that we have on defense. I think we have the highest ceiling going forward of all the teams in the division.
Moving on to draft needs and free agents, there's a lot of things this team needs moving forward. What do you think is the biggest issue going into the offseason?
Like I said earlier, it's just interior offensive line and running back. Those are definitely the two that stand out. If we're looking at free agency, I would consider Melvin Gordon. I would consider Leonard Fournette. I would consider Chase Edmonds. I would consider getting Leonard Fournette and Chase Edmonds as a Thunder Lightning approach. Chase Edmonds fits our offense, kind of like how Travis Etienne would, in a way that we're a passing offense. Chase Edmonds is a pass-catching back. I think he's a souped-up version of Devin Singletary. I like him a lot. I actually have him on my fantasy team. He's hurt right now, but when he's healthy, he's a good back. And then there's a couple other backs that are available that could potentially help us. But I think in the draft, it would be either Breece Hall out of Iowa State or Isaiah Spiller out of Texas A&M. Those are two really, really solid backs. Breece Hall's an all-around back. He kind of reminds me of like a J.K. Dobbins almost. He's a solid all-around back. And then Isaiah Spiller is he's more explosive and more, pass catching oriented. But those are backs that I would consider in the back of the first round or definitely in the second round. I would definitely consider taking them. I know people don't like taking running backs high, but we have a really big need, and so I think it makes it okay because we're pretty desperate for running backs. So those are the routes I would take, and then just it depends on what matching that with the interior offensive line, it just depends on where you take a running back as to where you're going to invest in the offensive line. If you take a running back in the first round, I'll go offensive line second round. Flip flop to if running back goes in the second round, I take offensive line first round, and then I would definitely consider taking or signing a guard or center in free agency because, like I mentioned, Mitch Morse is a free agent this year, and then we obviously have holes at guard. So those are my two priorities, and that's kind of some of the possibilities that we have to fill those holes.
I think also you're gonna have to fill some holes at wide receiver, especially with Sanders gone. I think Davis is capable for sure,
Mm-hmm.
but also you've got Beasley who's gonna be up. I would say if if this team isn't committed to the running game, which they seem they're not, just invest all you've got into the passing game. Dawson Knox, he's coming on. I mean, obviously he had a really rough game versus the Patriots, and he's had a rough stretch since coming back from surgery. But there's a lot of options available at wide receiver. Obviously, we're not going to be getting Devonte Adams. He's not coming back to Green Bay, but most likely he doesn't want to come to Buffalo here and be with us. Um, but there's Jamison Crowder. That's a great option at slot. He's one of the best. I think he's one of the best at slot. Being about a slot receiver. What do you think about him?
Yeah, I like James Crowder. I would be concerned kind of with just he's kept kind of getting up there in age, but that's an option that we'd be able to have, and I think I'd prefer getting a guy in the mid rounds of the draft because I think slot receivers aren't as coveted in the draft as outside receivers. I think guys who play on the outside are more likely to go higher, and so I think you can find a decent slot receiver in the third or fourth round. Like Amon St. Brown for the Lions, like I'm in the fourth round, I'm pretty sure. Um, he's been great for them. And so, yeah, that's where I would go. I just get one in the draft.
I think what's interesting is this year, like last year, it was all about passing offenses. You had Mahomes, the big explosive passing offenses. You had the Buccaneers; they were great at passing. You had us; we were one of the best air attacks in the league. Every team seemed like they were going after uh, throwing the ball, but now all of a sudden, the Patriots are back in the picture. They're running the ball down people's throats. The Chiefs are they're not as like explosive now, but they're showing a little bit more commitment to running the ball because they're being forced to. Obviously, the Ravens, that's been their game style. You got the Steelers, they're pounding it down people's throats. The Bengals, with Joe Burrow, they're using Joe Mixon a ton, um, running it down your throat, being physical. They're not throwing as much as top air attack teams would. Also, the Browns, they're literally built on running. Their quarterback can't do anything. The Titans, they're still committed to the run. And the Colts, one of the, they're a really hot team right now. I would look out for them. They're running the ball. So, do you think in the offseason, Bean's going to take this into account? I don't think he'll turn us into a running team because that's just not who we are, especially if after you paid Allen. But do you think he's going to show more commitment to the run game, invest a lot into interior offensive line, or stick with building up this passing attack to be as good as they could be?
Yeah, like I was saying, he's definitely going to have to get into your offensive line and running back. Like he has to. There's no choice. You have to have at least a competent running game, something that you can lean on when you have to. I know we're a passing offense. We're never going to be a running offense, but you have to have a running threat at least that you can rely on if you need to, and when the weather's bad. So that has to be priority number one. And like you said, there are a lot of teams that are having success that can run the ball right now, and that's just something that you have to have the option of running the football. So that's something that we definitely need to address in the offseason, and I think Brandon Bean will address that, whether it be in the draft or free agency.
Okay, as we wrap up, final predictions for the Bills season, um, record, and where we finish in the playoffs.
Like I said, 11-6 for me. Could be 10-7. Just depends on whether we beat the Patriots or not. But I'm leaning towards 11-6. I think we end up getting that 5 seed. With probably the Bengals and Chargers getting 6 and 7. And then just I would predict that we win in the first round, and then lose in the divisional round. I don't know exactly what who we're gonna match up with, but I don't think we can last very long because teams are figuring us out. They're playing too high safeties and taking away some of that passing threat that we had last year that teams hadn't figured out quite yet. Um, so they're taking advantage of us that way. I just don't think the style of football that we play right now can win in cold weather games and late into December. I think Josh Allen will carry us to a victory in the wild card round, but then we'll have a somewhat early exit in the divisional round.
I'm gonna say 11-6, just like you. I have a good amount of confidence we'll beat the Patriots next time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think we're gonna be around that 5 or 6, and I think the Titans are gonna fall off, and the Colts are gonna take over that division. And if we face the Colts first round, that's an automatic exit. I don't think we can compete with them. We could barely beat them last year with Phillip Rivers, and now they're actually running the ball, and they've got a quarterback who can at least throw with Carson Wentz.
I
Um,
agree with you. I will say this though. I will say this: if we play the Colts in the playoffs, I would rather play them as the fifth seed because we get to play them in Indy,
sure.
and we don't,
Yeah.
and that's the don't. And I would rather play the Colts in Indy than I would in Buffalo because of the way that we match up. But you can continue.
Um, I don't think there's many favorable matchups for the Bills unless they can somehow win the division. Maybe you get the Titans or the Bengals. That's hopeful. Like that's about the best matchup you're gonna get. And this just isn't the year for the Bills. I think these teams are literally they seem to be built to beat the Bills. Um, they're just gonna be able to run it down our throats, and I don't think we have anything to say about that.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, well, let's hope for the best on Sunday versus the Buccaneers. And that concludes the show.